Someone I'm beyond honored to have on the show. Professor William A. Jacobson is a clinical professor of law and director of the Securities Law Clinic at Cornell Law School. He is the founder of, I have two blogs I read multiple times a day. And I mean, I hit the professor's blog easily 15 times a day, Legal Insurrection blog. Prior to joining the Cornell Law School faculty in 2007, Professor Jacobson had a highly successful civil litigation and arbitration practice in Providence, Rhode Island, concentrating in investment, employment, and business disputes in the security industry, including many high-profile cases. Professor, it is an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
It is a pleasure. You have written so much, and I want to thank you for your blog. Legal Insurrection is a gift, and I fully endorse it and read from it all the time. But you've been covering what I think, if I were to go pitch this story in Hollywood of the John Doe investigation of Scott Walker and trying to get at Walker's donors and supporters, I don't know that I could get it sold in Hollywood, though it would be a great story, because I don't know that anyone would believe it. So will you tell the audience in Seattle what a John Doe investigation is and how it unfolded in Wisconsin? I don't even think I can communicate it. I need you to tell people what it was and how it went down.
Sure. Well, it is very difficult to summarize briefly, but the long and the short is that the John Doe procedure, which is somewhat unique to Wisconsin, allows for secret investigations to take place, with the unique twist that the targets of the investigations and people subpoenaed are not allowed as a matter of law to speak about it. So there were two targetings by a Democratic prosecutor out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, targeting Scott Walker in these John Doe proceedings. The first one had to do with Walker's time as county executive. That proceeding was started, I believe it was in 2011, and there were leaks, strategic leaks made during the recall election against Walker in 2012, which somehow got to the press, the secret investigation. The long and the short is that nothing ever came of it, and a couple of low-level people got in trouble for something that didn't implicate Walker. But the more important one was John Doe number 2. John Doe number 2 was an investigation into whether there was an illegal coordination between conservative activists in Wisconsin and the Walker recall campaign. Your listeners may or may not recall, no pun intended, that after Scott Walker was elected in 2010, he passed the collective bargaining reform laws regarding public sector employees, and that set off a firestorm of protests. They took over the state capitol. There were death threats. It went on and on for months, and there was an effort made to recall him as governor. So he ran for election in 2010, and then 2 years later, he's fighting a recall election, and that he defeated. And so this John Doe number 2 was looking into whether or not there was illegal coordination. And so what they did is they started this proceeding, and they got a judge to sign off on subpoenas and search warrants, and they literally practically busted down doors in the middle of the night. They raided homes, they seized computers, they seized emails, they did all sorts of horrible things, and then the targets, the people whose homes were raided, weren't even allowed to talk about it. And this went on for several months, maybe a year, and then finally one person blew the whistle on it and said, I don't care if the law says I can't talk about it, I'm going to talk about it. And then he went to the Wall Street Journal, and then everything blew up. And the long and the short is that they essentially, the Democratic prosecutor, shut down the entire conservative movement in Wisconsin because dozens of people were subpoenaed. They weren't allowed to talk about it. Their records were seized. It was Wisconsin Club for Growth was one of them, and there were many others. And it was this nightmare procedure, almost like something from a Franz Kafka novel or something, that you're the subject of an investigation, your records are seized, your neighbors see the police show up at your home in the middle of the night carrying stuff out, and you're not even allowed to tell them what has happened. And so basically what it did, it froze the entire conservative movement in Wisconsin for the better part of a year. And then slowly but surely people began to fight it, and they fought it in court. And the theory to fight it in court was your entire argument that what we were doing, even if we were doing it, was illegal, is unconstitutional, that you cannot prohibit people from conversing with others on what they call issue advertising in various issues. And so they challenged that in court. It went back and forth in the federal courts, and finally, about a month ago, the Wisconsin Supreme Court threw out the total investigation, ordered all the records that had been seized returned to the targets of this investigation, and said that the entire prosecution theory, legal theory for starting this thing, which went on for years, was unconstitutional, and threw the case out. And that's where it was. For 4 years, they dug through not only Scott Walker's files, but the files of almost everybody he knew, and they never found anything on him.
It's a phenomenal fact of what occurred there, and my guest is Professor William Jacobson, the founder of Legal Insurrection. I fully endorse it, legalinsurrection.com. It should be a daily read of yours. It's so important to the movement. Professor, this sounds to me, the way I understand the John Doe process, or at least in this case, was they wanted to find out if there was probable cause. I don't see them coming in with some smoking gun, but I also don't know that the goal was ever to convict anybody as much as it was to do what you said to do, was to shut down the conservative movement. It seems so consistent with what happened at the level of the IRS. Different tool, different tactics, but Lois Lerner had the same effective, outcome of approving 3 conservative groups in that time frame. Is this happening in other states that you're aware of, or has this been unique in the way they targeted Governor Walker?
I think it was somewhat unique because they had this procedure which was cloaked in secrecy. And you're right, this was something that is not supposed to happen in this country. In this country, you investigate people when you've got probable cause to believe they've committed a crime. In this case, their entire theory of probable cause was legally invalid, and it was so held by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. What they did is they took an invalid legal theory. It would be as if they said, they're going to investigate me because I walked down the sidewalk. And they got some inattentive judge to sign a search warrant on it, and from then on, they had free reign. So the entire theory was wrong. But what they were doing, they were trying to find a crime. It's what the chairman or the chief of the KGB under Stalin had a very famous quote. He says, "Find me the man, and I will find you the crime." And that's what this was. They wanted to get Scott Walker, and they spent 4 years looking for a crime. And that's not what's supposed to happen in this country. And, of course, then they denied publicly that they were targeting Walker, but that in some emails that have recently been released, even people inside Wisconsin government were saying this is ridiculous. Of course they're targeting Walker. I'm paraphrasing what they said. And so this was meant to get Scott Walker. They couldn't have cared less what some conservative activist was doing unless they could pin it on Walker. And again, they found the person, because you got to understand that the climate in Wisconsin was completely insane. I covered at the website practically daily what was going on during those Madison, Wisconsin protests. And there were people who were literally trying to take over offices in the state capitol. There was one woman, and I love this photo from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
I know what you're going to see. I remember this.
You know where I'm going. If you've read the blog, you know where I'm going. She took one of those U-shaped bicycle locks and locked her head to the metal railing in the state capitol.
Yeah.
Of course, I wrote at the time, turn out the lights, lock the door, and go home.
Yeah, have a good night. I hope you enjoy yourself.
But that just shows you how insane it was.
And this is, I guess, what I want people to understand. And my guest is Professor William Jacobson of Legal Insurrection, legalinsurrection.com. I want people to understand about Walker because I've been disappointed. I don't think he's been a horribly effective presidential candidate. But the PAC named after him, Unintimidated, is well named because Walker didn't give up in the face of this. And thank goodness. And I know the person you and I know in common, the gentleman who stepped out, and God bless him for doing it, for blowing the whistle on what was being done to him. But I think that Walker has steel and backbone beyond what people can see on TV. And I mean, you've covered him for so long. How do you think he'd better communicate the fact that this guy is not only a governor, in my judgment, who governs from the right and brings about conservative reform, but does so in the face of union? There's such a thing as union activists, union members, good, honest laborers, and then there's people who perform thuggery, like going to Scott Walker's parents' house and intimidating them. How do you think he could better communicate to the United States just how tough he is and how good he is at governing under those circumstances?
Well, I think it's difficult because he is somebody and I'm a fan of his. Whether I support him over another candidate, I haven't made a decision yet, but I'm a fan of his because he just quietly went about his business and completely eviscerated the public sector union movement. And public sector unions are not like private unions where you have a legitimate bargaining between a company and a private sector union. When it's the public sector, it's completely corrupted. They donate money to politicians. There's never a real negotiation, and they essentially become a shadow government. And they donate a big portion of those mandatory dues to Democrats. So it's this circle where they donate to politicians, they get sweetheart deals, then they donate more money, and he broke that cycle, and he broke the back of a key fundraising mechanism for the Democratic Party in Wisconsin, and he did it without a lot of flair and a lot of fanfare. He's not the one who was screaming about it, it was the protesters, and he could have very easily, when tens of thousands of people were taking over the state capitol, he could have very easily said, well, let's find a way to compromise here. Let's find a way out of this. Let's, reach across the aisle. And he said, no, they had the numbers they needed in the state legislature, and he just pushed it right through. And he's had other reforms there. So I'm a big fan of his type of conservative, somebody who doesn't have to be flashy about it, but there's nobody among the 17 people who has accomplished, who has given the body blow to the left-wing movement in the U.S. like he has.
Yeah.
Now, how he communicates it is a completely different story. He was communicating it. Remember, up until Donald Trump soared a month or 2 months ago, Scott Walker was at or near the top of all of the polls. The message was out there. He just, as many of the others, have not dealt very well with the Trump phenomenon, with Trump essentially taking all the oxygen out of the room.
Yep.
And I think he stumbled. He has not done a good job at that. And maybe he can't translate it into a national platform and campaign. That's something he and his people are going to have to figure out. I'm not a political advisor, but it really would be a shame when this thing sorts itself out in 3 or 4 or 5 months and there are really only 3 or 4 top contenders left. I think it would be a shame if the one guy who's actually accomplished the most for the conservative movement is not among those people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'd like to see him in there. Professor Jacobson, it's been an honor to have you on. I hope you'll come back again. The blog is legalinsurrection.com. I kid you not when I tell you I hit it 15 times a day. It's really important to the movement. It's a smart blog, and it's so well written. Professor, please come back and join us again. Will you do that?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.